Desmond Ridder showed some real promising signs that he could be the Falcons' QB1 of the future against the Arizona Cardinals. We'll break down a pivotal drive for him in the second quarter of that Week 17 win. We'll answer some of your listener questions, but we'll also be talking about the scary events involving Buffalo Bills defensive back Damar Hamlin on Monday Night Football.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So, guys, you know me. I'm Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Sirius Black, a.k.a. Mr. Drew, and a.k.a. the most humble host here of this illustrious Locked On Falcons podcast, part of the Locked On Sports Atlanta podcast family, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Falcons is brought to you by the Ultimate Football GM. If you've ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your own football franchise, this is the game definitely for you. Just download the game. Just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up in the app stores. Our listeners will get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code LOCKEDON, that's LOCKEDON, all caps, in the game store. And guys, we thank you for making a Locked On Falcons your first listen each and every day. Of course, it's free and available Monday through Friday on a variety of podcast platforms, including Apple, Odyssey, Google, Spotify, and YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Falcons on YouTube, and you will get the video version of the podcast the night before the audio drops. And make sure you check out Locked On Falcons on your Roku and Amazon Fire TV as part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. Just download the Locked On Sports Atlanta app. You'll get Locked On Falcons as well as the other Locked On Sports Atlanta shows like Locked On Hawks, Locked On Bulldogs, ATL Day Ones on your Roku and Amazon Fire TV. So, guys, later in today's episode, we'll get into the All-22 review of the Falcons' Week 17 win over the Arizona Cardinals, focusing on a pivotal drive for Desmond Ridder, where he sort of looked the part of a starting quarterback in the second quarter. We'll break down several plays in that drive. We'll get to some of your listener questions later in the episode, talking about tanking and, whether or not the Falcons should be looking at wide receivers this offseason. But let's start talking about the thing that occurred on Monday Night Football in the Buffalo Bills Cincinnati game. For those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, Damar Hamlin, the Bills safety / corner, made a routine tackle of T. Higgins in the first quarter of that game, then got up and then immediately collapsed. He was transported to the hospital, University of Cincinnati Medical Center. Since we have been learned that he suffered cardiac arrest, he's been intubated. He's currently in critical condition. As of this recording, there hasn't been really any updates in the last few hours as I'm sitting here, shortly before 5 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday. And obviously this was a very scary situation involving Damar Hamlin. And certainly if, you believe in praying, pray for him to pull through. And if you don't believe in prayer, then, do whatever you feel is necessary to do. But, for me personally, given that I watched Damar Hamlin play a lot of football over the years at Pitt, it felt a little close to home, not to suggest that, had he gone to, Bowling Green or something like that, I would have not felt just seen that situation as just as scary. But certainly given that sort of Pitt connection, for those of you guys that don't know, I am a Pitt alum, although I was at Pitt when Damar Hamlin was, just a child. So no overlap there. But watching that sort of situation unfold on Monday night, and really not having the information then, for that hour or two afterwards, just, glued to the screen, hoping ESPN, glued to Twitter, hoping to get some updates. I apologize in advance, but I couldn't help but have some of those morbid thoughts, thinking back to a comment that Carson Palmer made years ago, like in 2009, I believe, talking about, with the speed and violence of the game, being worried about a player dying on the field. And part of me wondered, did we just witness that? Now in the hours, in the day or so, half a day since that, I've come to learn that there have been instances where players have died on the field, had heart issues, or, other issues that led to their death after football. That, it hasn't happened since like the 50s, 60s, and 70s, but it is something that does put into perspective this game. But fortunately, That did not occur on Monday night, thanks to the medical professionals and the training staff on hand, to perform CPR, get Damar to the hospital, and hopefully the medical professionals there will continue to help him pull through, and we will continue to offer our prayers to him, his family, his friends, Buffalo Bills, Cincinnati Bengals, all that and more moving forward. And it does lead me to think a lot more about, the last couple of years we've dealt with some stuff in the world, and it does allow you to appreciate, the medical professionals out there that, the doctors, the nurses, the EMTs, the paramedics, all those things that, do have saved countless lives over the last couple of years. And some of those other things that have gone on in the world have sort of led to me understanding what my role is as, a host of a daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, that ultimately, given some of the hardships that we all face in our daily lives, and hopefully no one has to deal with sort of the hardships that the Hamlin family is currently undergoing. But, I know my role here is to serve as a distraction for you. Like, I know, we're going to talk later about, Desmond Ridder and, should the Falcons pursue wide receivers in the offseason, or possibly we'll get into maybe a listener question about the safety position. And all this stuff is kind of trivial in sort of the bigger picture in terms of the game of life. But I certainly appreciate all the people that support this show, and we will continue to be that distraction for you each and every day, to talk about these sort of trivial matters as we see them. And so if you need my permission for the next 20 or so to 30 minutes of this episode, and the next 30 to 40 minutes each and every day, as your first listen, to be distracted from those things, those real issues that you deal with in your life, then you have my permission if you needed that. So we will sort of leave the Damar Hamlin conversation there. Obviously, if there are updates, we'll keep an eye on that moving forward, and hopefully in the coming days and weeks we will get some positive news on that front. I don't really necessarily have any thoughts on the NFL's handling of the situation, player safety, those sorts of things. What's the logistics of playing this game or playing the other games this weekend? To me, all that stuff is kind of inconsequential. We'll deal with that stuff later at a later date. The most important thing is that Damar's health and safety, and that he pulls through. So again, continue to offer those prayers. But we will sort of end that part of the conversation and move forward, and we'll talk about that trivial matter that is Desmond Ridder, and whether or not he is the Falcons quarterback of the future. And we'll break down a couple of plays that he had on a second quarter drive that, to me, really signaled that Desmond Ridder has the tools of what it takes to be a capable starting quarterback in this league. And we'll get into that as we continue today's episode, guys. But before we get there, I want to tell you about today's sponsor. That is the mobile game Ultimate Football GM. If you've ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your own football franchise, well, that dream has now come true, and this is definitely the game for you. You can manage every strategic aspect of your team, whether it's hiring and firing coaches, coordinators, trading players, signing players, drafting players. The thing about this game that's great is it's very challenging. It's very realistic. I know for me, when I started the game, and you sort of start as a rebuilding team, and you can sort of say, hey, we're rebuilding, or you can sort of set the expectations a little higher than that. And I was like, yeah, this game is not going to be too hard. I'm a genius. I know all these things. And so I set my expectations a little higher, thinking that we were going to win 6 games, in this quote unquote rebuild year. And we started out 2-1. And I was like, oh, this game is easy. And then we proceeded to lose 11 straight games. And of course, now I'm like, oh, I'm about to get fired. So if you feel like addressing some of those challenges, of course, this is the game for you. And the great thing about Ultimate Football GM is that you can get a 100% free boost to your franchise with the promo code Locked On. That's all caps LOCKEDON in the game store. That's promo code Locked On. Try it out today. Download the game by visiting ultimate-gm.com or look it up in the App Store. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. And guys, I want to thank you again for making Locked On Falcons your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe for your second listen to the Locked On NFL podcast and get the daily conversations about the biggest NFL stories. You get the in-depth analysis with key predictions every Friday. And then on Monday, you get all the insight from the local insiders like yours truly over the weekend's action on the game-to-game episodes. So subscribe to Locked On NFL today, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. So talking about Desmond Ridder's performance, and again, with the thing that we've been talking about the last several weeks, is we're seeing steady progress. And I think, seeing Desmond Ridder play his best game to date, was the expectation, given that the quality of competition was going to be lower against this Arizona Cardinals team. And again, watching the film, you see, signs of like, okay, there's something here with Desmond Ridder, and time will tell if the Falcons can bring more out of that. But if you're looking for optimism for some of the things that Desmond Ridder can do, I think you focus on, particularly for me watching the film, that second quarter drive beginning at the 10-minute mark in the second quarter that ultimately ended with the Falcons turning the ball over on downs in the red zone. But the Falcons went 60 plus yards on 12 plays, and a lot of it came off of Desmond Ridder's arm rather than just relying on what we've seen throughout this season and other drives in this game where the Falcons are just relying on their running game to be able to move the ball. So let's talk a little bit about some of the plays that I saw that I think make you a lot more eager about continuing to watch Desmond Ridder's development in the coming week and potentially months or years. So on that drive, you go to the fourth play. It was a 2nd and 11. It resulted in a 12-yard check down to Tyler Algier, where he did a great job making 2 defenders miss. And that goes back to a conversation we had on yesterday's episode about Algier's improved footwork and quickness that he's shown from the beginning of this season. And that play was a great illustration of that. But when you look at Desmond Ridder on that, he did a great job getting from 1 to 2 in his progressions. His first read was Drake London on an out pattern, but he was reading the cover 2 cornerback in the flat. And if that defender sunk on that vertical route, which he did, he quickly goes to the check down, which he did. And then, that's something. Checking the ball down to the running back is something that we have not seen a lot of in this offense this season. We rarely saw under Marcus Mariota, although to be fair to Mariota, like it wasn't as if the Falcons were asking their running backs to release into the route that much. That has been one thing that has changed over the last 3 games, over the 3 previous games when Mariota was a starter, is that the Falcons are actually asking their running backs to release into the route a lot more. And some of that is owed to seemingly, again, that greater confidence in the offensive line to hold up in some of these passing situations as part of this evolution of this offense. So hopefully we can continue to see that evolve going into next year and this upcoming week. But then you look at the next play, I think after a penalty play that nullified a play, but it was a 1st and 20, I think it was a holding call or whatever it was. This was a 13-yard completion to Drake London. And on this particular play, Ridder gets some pressure up the middle, given up by Chris Lindstrom up the middle, and then sort of breaks outside the pocket, hits Drake London on a late crosser. And really, it's less about Ridder on this play, but more about London, because I love that London was sort of continuing to work his way across the field for his quarterback. And we talked like a month ago about Drake London's body language seemingly being over the Marcus Mariota experience. And it clear to me, like this play illustrates what we're talking about, where that rapport between him and Ridder is much stronger than it was with Marcus Mariota. Then a couple of plays later, play number 8 on this drive was a 1st and 10, 25-yard catch to Michael Pruitt off of play action. And this play, I really like the timing and rhythm in which Ridder threw the ball to get the ball out. There's a kind of a minor hitch in his throw, the slight hesitation as he's waiting for Pruitt to clear the linebacker. And that's something that you could certainly say Ridder needs to clean up. A couple of times he kind of hitches the ball, and that allows defenders to potentially break on it. That does open up the possibility. A positive of that is, pump fakes and double moves later in the offense, especially if the Falcons have a lot more confidence in their pass protection to hold up to allow those longer developing routes. But one of the positives you do like about the fact that Ridder is kind of hitching on some of these plays is that it's showing you that he's getting through his reads very quickly. In fact, quicker than the receivers are getting to their spots. And so we'll talk a little bit later about this, but like it kind of tells you that, the Falcons need to get a little bit more speed on offense so that these receivers can get to these spots to match with Ridder's sort of processing, if you ask me. Then a couple of plays later on play number 10, it was the 2nd and 12. This was a 5-yard scramble from Ridder. He wants to throw a crosser to Drake London. Drake London does get open, but the pocket is a little muddy, and Ridder has to duck under a couple of edge rushers collapsing on the pocket, but he's able to stay balanced, run and scramble, get 5 yards. And this is where we're going to compare Ridder to Matt Ryan, talking about how had Matt Ryan or a less mobile quarterback had been in the game, this is probably resulting in a sack. This is potentially resulting in an 11-yard loss. And instead of a 3rd and 7, like you get with Ridder scrambling with Matt Ryan at the helm, this is potentially like a 3rd and 18. And thus the Falcons are settling for 3 points in all likelihood on this drive, rather than, being able to get in a position to convert on the next play. You get a 3rd and 7 on that play 11. It's a 5-yard completion to Michael Pruitt. Again, another indicator of Ridder getting the ball out quickly, reading that off coverage from the cornerback and throwing to Pruitt in the spot, giving him an opportunity to catch the ball, turn up field and make a play. But obviously the defender does a great job closing on it to prevent the conversion there and set up the 4th and 2 on the 12th play of the drive, which the Falcons run a sprint out. And Desmond Ridder misses Drake London on this particular play. One of the things we noticed on the TV copy watching the game live, it looked like Olamide Zaccheaus might have been open in the flat. He wasn't. There was a defender right there ready to check him. You can maybe nitpick the throw a little bit where it's a little bit off target to London, but I actually think Ridder kind of threw the ball to where it needed to be. I think the issue here was maybe Drake London didn't run the route that he needed to instead of sort of working his way back to the sideline after his break. He kind of just settled, so he was running a curl when he should have probably been running more of a whip route where he continued to work to the sideline, and Ridder threw it leading him that way. And then you couple that with the fact that, or the belief, the opinion, let's say, that the defender maybe got a little bit with some holding there and prevented Drake London when he did try to make his break from sort of getting that separation. But besides sort of nitpicking the result and the execution of the play, really, I think the bigger problem here is the fact that it was not a very great play call. This is something I think we discussed on the podcast before. And the sprint out is not a play that I think many of us are big fans of because it cuts off half the field, right? And the Falcons have run this a bunch this year. And hopefully we'll see Arthur Smith in the offseason. One of the things he'll make in the offseason is tearing this page out of his playbook. Now, earlier in the season when they were running it with Mariota, I didn't complain nearly as much about it because, it felt like, they had some limitations at the quarterback position, and we knew that the offense wasn't built around the passing attack. So given those kind of lowered expectations, he was just like, okay, like this is not a good play call, but like, I'm not going to sit here and spend too much energy complaining about it. But now as we continue to see, an evolution of this offense, we hope to see this offense continue to evolve and be more balanced heading into 2023. Like now it's like, okay, like remove this play from the playbook. I'd have to go through the film. Maybe it worked one time early in the season in like September or something like that. But the last time I can recall the Falcons successfully executing this type of play was maybe that Ridley touchdown against the Dolphins last year. And that was kind of a sprint out play, I think. And that my recollection is that barely worked. And it might have been because of Matt Ryan's mobility that I just mentioned a few moments ago, disparagingly. So like, it's just a play that just does not work in my opinion. So hopefully they will improve upon that. And this was a drive where I think Ridder was really operating, but unfortunately did not lead to points, in part due to the decision, the poor play call. Like, I think you can certainly question the decision to go for it on 4th and 2. Looking at the 4th down calculator at running backs don't matter. They say going for it, increased your win probability about 2.4%. So you could justify it from an analytics standpoint, as we were talking about, in the Ravens game a week ago with similar sort of go for it situations. But certainly, if you're going to go for it, get a better play call than the sprint out, if you ask me. But again, I think these are all positive signs that Desmond Ridder, there's something, going on with him, and that I think, he does have a future ahead of him. Again, is he going to be in the conversation with Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow and those guys as one of the elite quarterbacks in the league a year from now? No, probably not. But can he be an effective, functional, capable NFL starter? I think he's shown that baseline, and it's really about whether or not the Falcons can, from a play calling standpoint, from a personnel standpoint, in a development standpoint, get more out of him on a consistent basis next year as a starter. So if the Falcons do, and to be official here on the podcast, I do think if I was putting money down, I would bet that Desmond Ridder is the Falcons' week 1 starter in 2023. But should they make that the actual plan, I think people, at least based off of the 3 games I've seen so far, and unless there's massive regression next week against the Bucs, I think people should feel some degree of optimism and confidence that we can get, functional to good quarterback play next year if Desmond Ridder is that starter. So we'll leave the Desmond Ridder conversation aside. We'll talk a little bit more about the supporting cast, where we have a Q&A mailbag portion to close out today's episode, where someone's asked about whether or not the Falcons should prioritize the wide receiver position early in the draft and or free agency. And we'll also talk about the notion of tanking and sort of my thoughts on, why tanking is a perfectly reasonable thing to want to see the team to do, but it's not a reasonable thing to publicly advocate for. And we'll get into exactly why I think that way as we continue today's Locked On Falcons, guys. But before we get there, we're talking about the potential changes to a quarterback. And if the Falcons do make a change there, they certainly want to hire the most certified candidate. And if you're hiring for your small business and you feel like you want to get certified candidates, you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. They're making it easier to find the right people that you want to talk to faster and for free. You can create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach the world's largest professional network of over 800 million people. They have simple tools like screening questions to make it easy for you to focus on all the candidates with the right skills and experience so that you can prioritize who you want to interview and hire. You can finish the year strong by finding the right quarterback for your small business. That is going to help you. It's why all small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn is going to help you find the candidates that you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And guys, can your portable Bluetooth speaker hang with the Big Dog? Big Dog Speakers is giving you a portable Bluetooth speaker specifically designed in Augusta, Georgia, that delivers huge, clear sound, extraordinary battery life, and tons of connectivity options at a great price. If you want to party with friends, or if you just want to take or make a phone call, it's built to do it all, and it's backed by a 100% satisfaction guarantee plus a 1-year warranty. So go big with the Big Dog Scout, their inaugural model that includes a max volume of 105 decibels, 40 watts. It's waterproof. It charges other devices. You get 15 hours of playback, and you compare 2 of them to get that enhanced stereo sound. I have 2 of them hooked up to my computer right now, so I can get that stereo sound when I'm really dialing deep into the Falcons film, so I can hear, Desmond Ridder barking out calls in one ear and then hearing, the feedback from the crowd in the other ear. So make sure you check out the Big Dog Scout, now available online at bigdogspeakers.com at a price point of $99. But the great thing is, guys, you can get $20 off with the promo code Locked On. That's LOCKEDON. For more info, just visit bigdogspeakers.com. So starting into the Q&A portion of today's episode, our first question comes from Bogues at Bogle LaRue on Twitter. He asks, I would like to know your thoughts on us winning games after elimination. We've been pretty bad for about 5 years, so at this point, I like seeing the team fight no matter what and win games, even if it changes draft position. Please draft D-line. Love the show. Rise up. Well, Bogues, I think I used this analogy over the summer talking about tanking, talking about comparing it to sort of a fire department setting fires instead of putting out fires, right? NFL coaches, NFL players, their job is to win football games at its core essential. And so the idea behind tanking is, we will lose now so that we can win more, right? Like we will be worse at our job in order for us to be better at our job in the long run. And there's a dark, twisted logic to that, similarly to like you can look at a firefighter and say your job is to put out fires. And so therefore, if we set more fires and burn more things, we can put out more fires and therefore in the long run, maybe become better at putting out fires or something like that. There's a dark, twisted logic to that. And certainly in sort of the recesses of your mind, when you're sitting there in the dark recesses, rocking, late at night at 2 a.m. when you're dealing with insomnia, I can understand people thinking that. And I frankly, I don't have a problem with people thinking, that tanking is a generally good strategy. What I have a problem with is when people like act like publicly advocating for tanking is somehow like a normal thing to do. Similarly, in the analogy I think I used was like, it would be like someone going, you can think that, hey, the fire department, we should burn more things. You can be a pyromaniac or an arsonist and think that the fire department, you would help the fire department more by burning stuff. But if you go publicly in front of like a town hall or a city council meeting and you say we should adopt a civic statute that says we need to burn X number of fires each and every year so that we can make sure our fire department is able to put out more fires so that they can do their jobs better, like they're going to walk you out of that room and say, arrest this person. And so that's kind of my issue with the tankers, which is like, it's fine to think that tanking would help the team in the long run. But when you're sitting here acting like this should be quote unquote public policy, publicly declaring that, well, why is this team not tanking? This is terrible. All this stuff. Like, I get why you think the way that you think. There's a dark logic to it, but like, you can't really expect people that, have the job to do the opposite of the thing that you're advocating, don't do the thing that you're advocating for. You get what I'm saying? You can't get mad at the fire department because they keep putting out fires, right? You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of how I feel about it, Bogues. We'll move on to a Discord question from Rise Up. He says, hey, Aaron, I believe the Falcons should add another receiver this offseason. Who are some potential free agents we could sign? I'm not opposed to them drafting a wide receiver on day 2. Are you? No, I'm definitely open to the idea of the Falcons taking a wide receiver because I'm generally in the mindset of best player available. And the reason why I am in that mindset is because I look at this Falcons roster, and I'm not going to say they're devoid of talent or anything like that, but this is not a sort of elite roster. Like, they don't have that many foundational players. And what I mean by that is, like, if you compare our roster to, say, the Eagles or the 49ers, the two teams that are likely to be the top 2 seeds in the NFC this year, there's only a handful of players on the Falcons roster that you could probably transport to those rosters and think, oh, those guys will be difference makers on those teams heading into the postseason. And so ultimately, to me, the goal of the Falcons as they rebuild here, guys, is to add more of those players. The goal is to build a championship caliber team, and that's going to be a process that's going to take time. It's not going to be done in one off season, and that leads to a whole mess of conversation where, I think there's a lot of people that think like, there's pressure on this regime to kind of like turn this thing around immediately. And I just go like, we're in year 1 of a rebuild. What's going on with you guys? But, there was in this Arizona Cardinals game, there was a particular play on the first third down in the third quarter where Ridder got sacked on this play. And on that particular play, he was kind of locked in on Drake London on that play. And there was an open Demure Bird, running an out pattern, and Ridder just didn't see him. And part of the reason why he didn't see him because it was a third down situation, and he was like, I'm going to the guy I trust. That's Drake London. And you don't blame Desmond Ridder for doing that, particularly as a rookie quarterback and given some of the limitations that the Falcons have at that wide receiver position, because Matt Ryan used to do this, not only when he was a rookie quarterback and just forcing the ball to Roddy White, but also, throughout as he got older, particularly, and we talked about this on the podcast many years ago, like you look at those seasons like 2015, 2017, 2019, where Matt Ryan wasn't necessarily super confident operating the offense. And so in a lot of situations, he's like, I'm throwing the ball to Julio Jones. He's the one guy I trust that he's going to get open. I'm throwing the ball to him. And you saw a similar thing with Desmond Ridder. And so if Matt Ryan's doing that, at age 32, you can't really blame Desmond Ridder for doing it at age 22. And so it's not a coincidence also when you look at a couple of those seasons like 2015, 2017, especially, that the Falcons then invested significant resources the follow off season in adding wide receiver help. Now, I'm not suggesting that the Falcons need to go out there and spend big in free agency or use a number 1 pick at the wide receiver position like they did with Calvin Ridley in 2018. But certainly, part of the process of building this roster is going to be giving your young quarterback, whether it's Ridder or whether it's somebody else, or, Lamar Jackson, right? That's the common complaint in Baltimore right now with Lamar Jackson. He doesn't have anybody to throw to. And obviously we got Kyle Pitts coming back next year, so it may not be as pressing a need as it would be if we weren't having him come back. But again, he's coming off a major knee issue. No one knows exactly how that's going to affect his play. We're hopeful, we're optimistic, all that stuff. But you need to invest resources in it. Again, whether that's a day 2 draft pick, whatever, like, I'm open to it all, right? If there's I think the Falcons need more speed at the position, as I touched on earlier in today's episode. But if there's like a wide receiver that, runs 4.3 and also has the sort of physical skill set that Arthur Smith wants in his offense, that, can basically be like, if there's an Anquan Bolden out there that runs a 4.3 instead of a 4.6, like Bolden did, like, if that guy's available in the 3rd round, like I'll take that guy all day long, even if that's not a pressing need, because just the Falcons need those types of players. So looking at the list of free agents, to answer your question, a couple of guys that are out there that fit the sort of speed prototype, whether they fit the other types of things, and whether the Falcons should sign any of these guys, but just looking for more speed at that position and to get them another guy that Desmond Ridder won't ignore Damar Bird in that third down situation next year because he has a lot more confidence in that guy to get open in those do or die situations. But some guys like, Paris Campbell, Darius Slayton, Philip Dorsett, DJ Chark, Justin Watson, Marquise Goodwin, Mecole Hardman, Scotty Miller, Deshaun Jackson, Ashton Dulin. All of these guys are quote unquote fast guys. Now, whether or not these guys are legit number 2 receivers or whatever is up for debate. I'm sure that we'll talk about some of these players as we get closer to free agency as legitimate free agent targets. But those are just some of the names just skimming down the list of impending free agents at the wide receiver position that I think could certainly add, much needed speed to this offense. So we'll wrap up today's episode talking, answering Harry and Gary's Discord question. He says, "Hello, Aaron. Do you see Drew Dalman being the guy in 2023?" So it's a maybe. For me, what I think the Falcons need at the center position is someone who has the athleticism to do all the stuff that they ask their center to do in this blocking scheme. And I think Dalman does those things. He just doesn't do them as consistently as we would like. And you also need a center that can also deal with the sort of powerful, that can handle the power that he's going to face with some of these nose tackles like a Derek Brown, like a Vita Vea. And that's something that Dalman, I don't know if he's ever going to do. So I think with development, he can continue to get better at the athletic stuff. I don't know if he's going to continue to get better at the powerful stuff, although some of that may be technique-based stuff that you hope that with Dwayne Ledford's coaching, he can improve upon. And the issue I have with that is while I think there is certainly room to upgrade Drew Dalman in the center position, I'm not sure if those upgrades are going to be available this offseason. As I've discussed several times over the last several months, the impending free agent class on the offensive line is not a super, super deep group. And the center group in particular does not look like there's no, basically Alex Mack is not walking through that door. And I don't think there's an Alex Mack going to be available this offseason. That's part of the reason why you guys hear me advocate for something crazy like moving Chris Lindstrom from right guard to center next year, because Chris Lindstrom not only can do the athletic stuff, frankly, he can do the athletic stuff to a much higher degree than Drew Dalman does, but he also at least has much more ability, in my opinion, to do some of the physical stuff against the Vita Vea types than Dalman does, because he does have that great technique already down. So I'm fully aware that the chances of the Falcons moving Chris Lindstrom to center next year are probably 0, but I'll continue to pound the table between now and when we actually do see what their actual plans are at the center position unfold later this offseason. So, if you want to join the movement, as I say, by all means, there's plenty of room here on this bandwagon for moving Chris Lindstrom to center, even if we know it's a fantasy as opposed to a reality. But I am certainly much more open to the idea of bringing Dalman back, given, the presence of Dwayne Ledford and the confidence that I have in Dwayne Ledford to continue to develop these guys. And we can see improvement from Drew Dalman a year from now. But it's a similar situation as, the Mike Person situation, and then we had Chris Morgan and, we had an Alex Mack available to upgrade that spot from 2015 to 2016. I don't know, as I said, I don't know if there's an Alex Mack coming anytime soon. To me, the closest player to Alex Mack's skill set is Chris Lindstrom out there available. So I'd be open to that, but we'll see how the Falcons address it. But that's what we're going to do, guys. We're going to leave that aside. I know that some of you guys sent in other questions on the Discord. We may get to them later in the week. So that will do it for us, guys. I really appreciate you making Locked On Falcons your first listen each and every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL on all the same podcast platforms that you are currently listening to or watching Locked On Falcons. And guys, if you want to provide your feedback on any of the things I talked about before, or you want to send in questions for future Q&As, because one of the questions I was asked about, like, what are your off-season podcast plans? And I'm like, I got some plan. I'll start making plans, leading up to free agency. But then after that, we'll play it by ear based off of what the Falcons do. But, the offseason is a great opportunity for doing lots and lots of Q&As, because there will be days where I'm like, oh, there's not really anything to talk about on this random Tuesday in March. So let's do a Q&A. So the places to go where you can constantly send in those questions is via Twitter or Facebook at Locked On Falcons, via email to lockedonfalcons@mail.com. Of course, you can leave a comment below on Locked On Falcons YouTube channel, or you can hit the Discord up, the Locked On Falcons Discord. There is a link in the description below. So those are all the places to provide your feedback and to ask your questions, guys. I really appreciate you for tuning in on this day, and hopefully prayers out there for good news on the Damar Hamlin front. Guys, we'll be back tomorrow with a crossover Thursday with Locked On Bucs to preview this Week 18 matchup and see, how the Falcons can prevail over Tom Brady. Maybe their last chance to beat Tom Brady. So we'll get into that on tomorrow's crossover Thursday here as your first listen each and every day as part of the Locked On Sports Atlanta podcast family, your team every day.